Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the very popular Valley Story series. Delighted to say I'm joined by the former Charlton Athletic defender Paul Elliott. Paul, how are you? Long time no see.
Scott, I'm delighted to see you again, mate. Yeah, I'm really good. Been a challenging time in the world, but we're surviving, and I'm blessed I'm here to still enjoy.
Yeah, we actually live quite close to each other, but because of circumstances, we haven't seen each other for a long time. Great to see you. Look, we are here at the Valley, a place that has a special place in both of our hearts. I understand you grew up close to here.
Yeah.
Tell us about those early years.
I mean, it was amazing. I been a Charlton supporter since I was 8 years of age. I actually remember about 200 metres from me, you got Marion Park. Back in the mid-70s, the Beatles were playing there in the biggest concert ever. And this was at the Valley. There was over 100,000 people there. And I remember playing football with my brothers. There used to be this massive base. And I've had a wonderful affinity and relationship with this club. And having come here, watching Charlton when I was like 8 years of age. I mean, on that sort of stand at the back there, there used to be a little fence there, and I used the word bunk in. I used to sort of break this side fence, and me and my two brothers used to come in and watch. I remember Derek Howells, Mickey Flanagan, and you could see then the club had a special feel about it. And I went to school locally at Wood Hills School, lived in both the tower blocks here, Jutland House, Nelson Mandela, the big tower adjacent to us. Went to school locally. My in-laws lived 200 metres up the road. So, I've been very fortunate. I've had a good career, but this club, its values is just embedded in everything that I do. We lived in Thamesmead for a while, lived in Abbey Wood, obviously, as well as living in Charlton, in Lewisham. Not quite Belsize Park, Kings Road, but I'm proud of my roots. And everything about Charlton is it's special. I say it's special.
And so you should be proud as well. When was it that you potentially realised that actually the reality of becoming a professional footballer could happen?
Well, Scott, it's quite interesting because I went to a number of clubs as a kid. I remember I had trials at Luton Town, got rejected. I had trials at Chelsea, got rejected, said I weren't good enough. Went to Millwall, said I weren't good enough. And the irony is that Luton and Chelsea were two big career moves. But it was, I think, after I sort of got into the Charlton Colts, they called it, when I was around about sort of 14. I got rejected by Millwall, and I remember playing on Plumstead Common. And there was a guy called Roy Passy. He's a wonderful man. He was a scout.
I remember Roy. Yes,
and then you had the Silver Fox, Les Gore. Because it was Les that discovered Walshy, Paul Walsh.
Okay.
So they had a look at me and they said, would you like to come down for training? I was so excited. And I said, yeah, that'd be wonderful. So I came down, and then I used to play as a right winger, which you'd never believe it. I was like head down merchant, vroom, But
were you tall back then?
No, I wasn't. I had this sort of growth spurt about 15 going north. Okay. So I remember Roy Passy said to me, Paul, you know what? You could run, you could jump, you could head the ball. Why on earth are you playing as a right winger? So thereafter, we played. I remember we played a game at Eltham at the training ground. He put me at centre back. It was a southeast counties game then, and as they say, the rest was history. And I was lucky. I got a apprenticeship at Charlton at 16 in the first team, 16 and a half, 17. And then they say my career just sort of blossomed from there. So I was really grateful. But playing, having the opportunity to play, particularly in Charlton's first team, whilst I was still at school so young, because, I was like a baby. And, you had all these players in their sort of mid-20s, 28, 29. I remember it was Mickey Robinson, you had Derek Howells, you had Les Berry, Paddy Powers there. It was a wonderful evolution of the club. And what made me realise that I was so young, because they had kids and whatever, used to come, and I was just like this fresh-faced, young 16, 17-year-old boy training every day. I remember out on the car park, in the corner used to be like the Red Gra area. So I was sort of there, sort of training with these elite pros, and I felt so esteemed. I felt so proud to be part of that. And that's when I recognised, I'm going to have a football career, that I could hold my own. And then I got my second growth. Then physically, I started to mature, and then exponentially went through the roof.
It's amazing actually, because I sort of went to Palace about 10, 11, and then I stopped for a couple of years. And it wasn't until I came to Charlton at 14. There were a couple of other clubs, Spurs being one of them.
Yeah.
Nowadays, that would probably be too late, wouldn't it?
Correct. And I think, the whole development phase of football now, if you look at the academies and what they mean, and I see the relevance of the academy, but, I reminded somebody, I love talking football, as you well know, and I was saying I think the academy concept has been great and it's been good, but, I'm also a believer in that council estate footballer, that street footballer. And the boy Lookman at Charlton, I was reading about his bio the other day. Peckham boy, came through the system, was playing locally on the park, didn't go to a pro club until he was 16, which was Charlton Athletic, and then got a pro. So I think that you've got its advantages as well, because, I think that whilst that's important in terms of the learning, in terms of the development, the psychological, the physical, the technical, that's all very important, as we know, for a player development. Sometimes, Scott, it's too structured. Yeah. And you have to say, you just got to let the boy or girl play.
Yeah, and sometimes as a kid, you can have too much too soon.
Yeah.
And those people who do come in late, they have the hunger.
Correct. And I was one of them, growing up from the street, from the council. And I'm so proud of that because, I had that inner hunger. And I think it's something that, I've got two lovely kids. I love them to death. But I know if I gave my kids everything, as much as you want to spoil them, you spoil them with love. If you gave them everything materially, I think you're breeding monsters. They have to understand values about, doing without, about work ethic, about sharing, a desire level, about saying, I've got the aspiration to want to go to the stars. How am I going to get there? I'm going to go out there and work hard, and I make sure my kids got a job.
Not have everything nowadays.
Not that. Yeah, so it's about work ethic as well, and patience. So I think, Scott, that worries me. That worries me, and we've seen now the modern day young kid comes through the academy, gets rejected, they're totally traumatized, they're decimated, the family's psychologically decimated. They don't realise, because I do a lot of mentoring for young kids, I say, kids, listen, you've not made it up football, but now with the modern day game, you could be an administrator, you can be a coach, you can be a referee, you can work in sports science. There's so many other pathways, and you've got another 30 years to be a success at something in your life. So that's given the other side.
Totally. Little Johnny doesn't make it, and suddenly it's like, well, what do we do now? And that's all the eggs in one basket. Going back to that Paul Elliott 16-year-old, did you say you were 16 going to school and pretty much in the first team, or at least training with the first team?
Yeah, I was training with the first team.
What was that like?
Unbelievable, and I remember my headmaster, because I was, I in many respects, I caught up later because I studied, but I sacrificed my education, really. Because my generation, Scott, you know and I know, it was all or nothing. All we wanted to do from me playing on Marion Park, Charlton Park, Plumstead Common, wanted to be a footballer.
5 or 6 games a week, wasn't it?
That was it, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So for me, actually sort of thinking, well, okay, I went to school in the mornings, and then, I'd leave at about 11 o'clock and come to training, and it was just surreal to think, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and even was out on, was on the Valley pitch training with the first team. Well, I'm this young whippersnapper of Elliott boy, and I just thought, I felt, Christ, it just empowered me to a level it was just hard to sort of equate that in your mind that I'm 16-year-old, I should be at school, but no, I'm here training in the first team, and also physically mixing the interactions physically and thinking that I've earned the right to be here. That was really hard. And then, leaving at the Valley and just sort of walking back up. What I used to do, I didn't really go out for the front. I'd walk up the stand and then go through the same hole in the fence that I created all those years ago and walk back home. Brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant. I remember as a 15-year-old, we got to the Youth Cup final, FA Youth Cup final. Really good Charlton team, Carl Eburn, Ronnie Morge, Stevie Feller, Mickey Bennett. Just some fantastic players, Darren Pitcher. I used to have to, every 3 weeks when the next round was, ask for the Monday afternoon off to go and play in the next round. So geography got a hit, I got a D in the end.
Okay.
That's the reason why I think I got a D.
I just didn't turn up for mine, to be honest.
But also, again, you think about, I lived 25 minutes from Sparrows Lane, the training ground. Now, if you drive, 25 minutes, but obviously at that time when you're 16, you don't drive. You're having to get 2 buses. Now, the buses were so unreliable, you had to get each bus beforehand.
Correct.
So you're leaving like an hour and a half before, but you didn't think twice about it because It was what you wanted to do, and it wasn't because you wanted to be famous or earn lots of money.
Correct.
It's because you dreamt of being a
The
professional
love of
footballer.
it. And Scott, I was the same. I remember I used to get the 180 bus and then change up Woolwich and then get the 53 bus. And it was just in your DNA, wasn't it? You know, and I was so lucky because Roy Passy and Les Gore, they always looked, you know, I used to get like £1 expenses, you know, so I'd sort of buy, you know, a bag of chips on the way home. I mean, I'm really showing my age now, to be honest with you. But it just gave you the appreciation, because any opportunity that we had to make it, we just wanted to maximise it and optimise it. And I look back and I've got absolutely no regrets. And that's why, you know, I look at all the clubs I've paid for, you know, my heart, my soul. We've got the emotional side of it because of what the club means to me emotionally, being educated and going to school and my in-laws. But also it's what the club stands for and its values. And those values have been embedded in the DNA of the club from, you know, 40, 50 years. And it's been that golden thread. This club's always been so wonderfully welcoming. That's what I've always noticed.
So you are a Charlton fan. Do you
Yeah.
still remember the first game at the Valley? What memories do you have?
My very first
Your
game
very
that I played
first game in the first team.
Wow, I do remember. It was Crystal Palace. It was amazing because there was you know, one of my heroes, a player called Vince Hilaire. Prince Hilaire, we used to call him. He was the George Best of his time. What a talent! And it was an amazing experience. And I remember, like, you know, my mum come to watch me, my family. I remember my headmaster come to watch me, and people from the school. And it you know, it's that feeling. I remember my heart was, and playing in front of supporters. And I remember then I was only earning £16 a week, which, you know, you didn't even think about money. And I remember actually, you know, I was still cleaning boots before the game. And I remember, the manager, Mike Bailey, was there. You know, he's saying, "Paul, what you doing? You know, you're playing in the first team, son." So it was that habit of that apprenticeship, cleaning boots, putting stuff in the laundry, putting stuff in the skips. I was still doing that.
Not thinking you'd made it.
Correct. And I think that's a big sort of change. And I just felt it was a sense of, if I think about my journey, I've never been so proud about anything actually than my debut, because of my localised feeling, because of growing up here, because of the DNA of the club, and my emotional life has all been embedded locally. And I feel it every time, like even I've come down today, I get sort of a wonderful flutter.
Do you?
I get it all the time.
Wow.
And because I've not been here for a few years now, but I think about the club so much. I think about the work that it does in the roots of the community. You know, when it had all the previous adversity, and I've looked at the sort of change in ownership, and Thomas has come in, and one day I'll meet him, and he's been so wonderfully refreshing, not just for the club, but for football, for his humility, for his strategy, for his vision. And I feel that, you know, it's so positively progressive, and we've lived through a very challenging period, and I just think now, you know, all what's gone on in the world, the football has kept us going. The football has kept the whole country going, you know, and I just feel now, once we get some sort of normalisation now, I think it's going to be business as usual.
Yeah, I'm not sure who said it, but I totally agree. It might have been Jurgen Klopp. One of the most important, non-important things in society, and certainly very important for mental health. Just going back to Charlton, then, 70 games you played for Charlton.
Yeah.
How much did you enjoy your time in the first team?
Magnificent. Because I was so young, so fresh, so free, didn't understand pressure, didn't know what pressure meant. Playing in I was a baby, playing in a very mature team, people that believed in me, people that liked me, people that trusted me. And I think that experience, you know, I kind of say I started football as a boy, and by the time I left Charlton, I became a man. And it sort of educated me what was to come. And it was just great because I was so well supported, not just by the club, but by people locally, because I was that local person that sort of went to school, grew up here, educated here, so well known. And Walshy, then Paul Walsh, lived around the corner from me at that juncture when we were in Abbey Wood. So we were really lucky. You couldn't have had a better. Always knew there came a time when I knew, you have aspirations and you want to evolve and grow, but I never thought I'd be at Charlton all my life, but unfortunately they got into financial problems. It was under that Michael Glickstein area. Mark Holyer come in, and I was one of the assets that had to be sold. But it was so special. I mean, but Derek Howes, I remember the day the club was wound up, and he used to control the bar. Derek, Derek
still does.
Derek, still does. And I remember, he had a shotgun in the back of his car because he used to do a lot of pigeons shooting. And I remember when the administrators come in, and he had all the drinks behind the bar, and he was like taking the mickey a bit, but he's come out and he's taken his gun out. This is and he's gone in and he said to them, you take everything here, but leave those beers behind. And the administrators, they were kind of like that. He didn't mean it. So he's like loaded up all the crates of beer, stuck them in the back of his car. And Derek Howes, I loved him because, we were roommates, and I remember my first overseas trip to Spain. I said, Derek, can I get you something? I was very keen, very enthusiastic, and he said to me, big man, make me a nice cup of tea. So I'm making him a nice cup of tea. He says, is that all right? He says, yeah, that's good. He says, go and get me a beer, So I've gone down to the bar, come back and got him a nice beer. He says, good. He says, you're going to be a good player.
You'll do for me.
He says, you do. And me and him, we stuck as roommates all
Brilliant.
my time at Charlton. Elsie,
Brilliant.
that's why I've always got close to Derek. And he tells everybody about his story and me being his little roommate, fussing around him as a 17-year-old boy.
It's the way it went then. And,
Yeah,
and the legend
absolutely.
that is Derek Howes. That's a fantastic story. So you went on to play, and we'll come on to Chelsea, but you went on to play for Luton and Villa before moving to Pisa. I suppose interesting for you, Luton. But Pisa, what was it like playing in Italy? I found it absolutely amazing in Portugal.
I remember, my debut was against AC Milan. Pisa just got promoted. Pisa was it was a great time because it was a very young team. They sort of grew up, kids from in their teens, and I remember always this in the dressing room. AC Milan. I couldn't speak nominal Italian. You all the swear words first.
Always.
Pinot
Always.
Grigio, Rioja. So they got their priorities right. They got the strategic priorities right. And I remember the coach, Materazzi, comes out. He says, Elliott, come over. So I come over. And he's got his team sheet. And he says, today, big team. I say, okay, yeah, big team. He says, they've got these players. You don't know these players. They've got Van Basten. He says, okay. Hullet. Okay. Rijkaard. Okay. He says, centre-back, Maldini. I say, okay. He says, Ancelotti, midfield player. I said, okay, boss. And I just said to him, I laughed. I said, I said, oh, I'm going to be very busy then today. And it was just amazing. And I remember Ruud Hullet, I was marking him. Ruud, unbelievable. He was about 6'1", built like a middleweight boxer. And I was marking him from corners. He had dreadlocks. I was marking him edge of the box, and the ball came, and he got in front of me, went bang, scored an amazing goal, and I was marking him. But one of his dreadlocks poked me in the eye. And I had this bloodshot for about 2 weeks on the back of his dreadlocks. And since then, every time he's seen me, he's always given me so much grief and stick, saying, hey, I'm the only man who's out-jumped you, Paul. I always got on well with him, Ruud. And he was just an amazing player. I'm playing against, Maradona was my second game.
Wow. What was that
Pisa.
like?
Well, let's just say the closest I got to him was when I shook his hands at the end of the game. But I got sent off in the second game because I clumped him on the halfway line, and I think that was in Naples. And to be honest with you, I needed short of a police escort off the pitch because the supporters were gunning for me. Really? But I had no fear then, But I was so lucky. Playing in Italy, the experience, the technical, the tactical, the culture, the environment, the supporters. To do that I was 23. That was, I look back on that with so much gratitude because it was, and then obviously when I finished the career, sort of all the football, Italian football, Channel 4, James Richardson, and I, you know what, Scott, if you said to me, if you say, Paul, you've had a career, this is your career, I would never have dreamed I would have that kind of career. And I've been incredibly fortunate to have done what I've done. And most importantly, post-career, give back to the game as well, which is important.
We'll come on to that in just a second. I'm so fascinated about Maradona, and obviously we lost him, unfortunately. But who was the most difficult opponent you came up against in Italy?
I think it's got to be Van Basten, Marco Van Basten. Unbelievable. 6'3", he could run like a cheetah. His first touch was just exquisite. His movement was frightening. And he was physically so strong. He loved the confrontation with a centre-half, which I thought was very unusual for that type of centre-forward. So he could mix it with me as well. So he gave as good as he get. But his career finished, he was only 26 at the time. Technically, tactically, physically, psychologically, Maradona was the greatest player individually. He had magic in his feet. But Van Basten was just unbelievable. And I remember with Maradona, when down at the Sao Paulo, and I remember the stadium was full. There was about 62,000 people between about 2 hours before the kickoff. So he comes on, and he's got his own fizz, he's got his own sort of, and he's doing this routine. And he's like an entertainer, he's like a magician. So he's doing a routine with 2 oranges, on both feet, and he's doing that. And I'm thinking, Christ, I can't even do it with 1 ball. And he's doing it with 2 oranges. And when you just looked at him, you just think, this man's a light. The nearest to him that I felt that way has probably been where I was lucky enough to meet Nelson Mandela. You go into a room and it's darkness, and this person comes in, and it all lights up. And that's how I felt about Maradona. The impact, this power, this amazing ability, the influence that he had on people. And he had it everywhere he went. And when I see some of the footage, Scott, with Maradona, and a lot of it was unseen, you don't realise. We use this word greatness too lightly in football, don't we? We've got a kid who's 20, he's a great player. Well, he ain't done anything yet. Maradona, he made football look easy. That's what he done. And Van Basten, in that context, was probably, he was the one of the greatest, the best footballer, all-round footballer I played against.
You talk about Ruud Gullit as well. I played with and under him as
well. Yeah, that's right, at Chelsea, wasn't he?
Absolutely fantastic guy. Probably the second best player.
Yeah, and by the way, you got him past his peak, Scott, listen, if you think about it.
He came to Chelsea, I think he was 33. His knees his knees were shot.
Well, his cruciates were worse than mine.
And we're thinking, oh my goodness, if he's this good with his knees shot, how good was he back in the day? And you came up against him. But look, I've got to go off at a tangent here, because you just mentioned Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Unbelievable. I remember meeting him, because this was involved in a sort of World Cup bid, and my goodness me, it was like, the best way I could, it was like a out-of-body experience. And what we had done, we had a trip to Robben Island, and I actually went to the prison. I've actually got photos in the prison of where he was in the cell, and we went to Robben Island, and I got so emotional, because you're thinking, how can this man, he was in solitary confinement for over 22 years. I'm thinking solitary confinement in a room, and the size of the cell, you couldn't swing a cat in there, to be honest with you. And to think that one man that has gone through so much, and even one of the disturbing stories that I heard was what they used to do, they used to release some of the prisoners and give them this false sense of security. This is how they punish them psychologically. They'd actually think they're going to release them and take them home. So they're all thinking they're going home, but about an hour, they'd bring them all back into prison. So it's the psychology of that, and they tried to break you down. And Mandela, they showed, we actually went to the quarry where he worked in solitary confinement on his own, in his cell. Then when you met him thereafter, one thing that struck me, there wasn't the hintest form of bitterness, of anger. This man had such a beautiful, he had this, it was so internalized in his demeanor, this wonderful, eloquent, happy, because I think he recognizes, he misread the impact he's had on the world when he was in prison, and more so when he got released. And I remember it was actually said that a lot of, we went to some talks, and some of the prison officers then, they used to apologize to him when he was inside for when they had to beat him or torture him, because they said that we don't want to do this. And many of them, they said many of them got killed because they weren't prepared to carry out the executions on him, to destabilize him mentally and physically. They apologized to him. So that was the aura and the magnitude and the presence of the man. And for me, I think, wow, you know, to put the hardest thing, Scott, was putting your mind into that, you know, and this man that had this level of brutality against him for what? Standing up for human rights, doing right for people who are excluded, marginalised, disenfranchised, you know, and that's why he's you know, those people, we were talking about football, but we've gone off on a social issue, they're incredibly special. Incredibly
one of the most
special.
incredible human beings in history. Let's bring it back to football and Italy as well, because you did so well. You were voted one of the best foreign defenders in there.
That's right. You've done your research. Well done.
Someone's done it for me.
Well done. I thought so. But okay.
But I mean, I loved my time in Portugal, and I tried to embrace off the field as well as on. Someone even actually said to me, I won't mention names, that you think you're Portuguese. It was an English person who said it.
Yeah.
But I said, no, I'm just trying to integrate myself into where I am
culture,
now.
isn't it?
And I thought it's quite important to try and learn the language. The swear words are the first words you learn, and the last words you forget.
Yeah.
But why do you think you adapted so well? And how was it off the field?
It was brilliant. I think because I went there with no inhibitions. Also, I remember as well at the time, Ian Rush, he just signed for Juventus. Massive fee from Liverpool. And I think it's kind of funny because the way that deal came about, I was at Aston Villa at the time, they came over and they were looking at Mark Walters, left winger, Mark, really good mate of mine, and they watched him about 4 or 5 games, and at about 3 or 4 games, he went off with a hamstring injury. And it just so happened that month, Juventus signed Ian Rush on a pre-contract. And that month, I just had a great month, and I remember played against Rushy that month when he was at Liverpool. I remember playing against Mark Hughes, who's at Man United, Graham Sharp, who was centre forward for Everton, and I think it was also Kerry Dixon, who then was at Chelsea. And you know, I just had this purple month. For some strange, I had a great month. So all of a sudden, Mark Walters became irrelevant. It says, who's that centre half? Who's he? So, and also the fact that I think when I played against Ian Rush, and obviously I did well against him, he had just signed then for a record fee. So they're thinking, well, you know what, they've looked at those players and said, he's done well again. So then, you know, the rest is history. They kept monitoring, end of the season, that was done. So I suppose, Scott, I had no pressure. Ian Rush, we went there at the same time. Everybody was on Rush, the centre forward, the goal scorer. I was the defender. And they saw a lot of Italian traits in me as a defender, that I could defend. I was fairly comfortable on the ball. I was a good athlete. What I could do was attack the ball, which then a lot of Italian defenders couldn't do, you know. And I could communicate reasonably well. So I naturally integrated. The football was just great. And then off the field, you know, it was just fantastic because I was young, you know, so I could just go to the restaurants and, you know, they treated you well. They were just grateful because at that juncture we were only allowed 2 foreign players. So it was myself and Carlos Dunga, the Brazilian captain who then became manager. And Carlos was a great lad. And it's just funny, isn't it? You know, neither of us, you know, he couldn't speak a little English, but, you know, I'll just say the power of the wine bottle just brought us together like no other. That's the power of it. Yeah. That and spaghetti, that, you know, we solve many a problem.
It's a world language, isn't
absolutely.
it? Absolutely.
And then Carlos was brilliant because he'll get out all the condiments and we're doing all the tactics on the table, me and him drinking wine and talking. It was unbelievable. And I look back on that with so much affection. So I was just so lucky to have got that opportunity, but more importantly, optimized it, maximized it, and derived so much benefit. And integrating into the culture, you know, after 6 months, I could speak good Italian. And then life just got even sweeter, really, because there's one thing that, and I think it's a lesson for every player. If you get, you know, you go overseas, you have to integrate into the culture. If you don't do that, you know, you're doing a disservice to yourself. And people, I think, actually get offended by it. And because I immersed and I embedded myself in the Italian way of life, in the culture, the way I dress, the way I look, you know, and I'd eat socially, and I'd have a few drinks, it was just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. I found it difficult actually learning Portuguese. I could speak reasonably well, but I'd take a minute to say something, they'd answer me back 20 seconds in English.
Yeah, but Scott,
but they appreciated us trying.
Correct, that's my point. The fact that you were trying to integrate, you know, I mean, I remember my first interview I done on TV. I mean, I was like, you know, and they said, Paul, bravo, 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 you know, capitano, capitano. You know, I'm thinking, well, brilliant. So they like that because, and I think that's why I was so proud about 2.5 years ago, they invited me back to Pisa because they opened a museum. And during my time there, for that sort of 3 years, that was the only 3 years when they were in sort of Serie A in the top flight. So all my teammates were back there. I mean, there's 2 of them I've always kept in touch with up until sort of a couple of weeks ago with WhatsApp, and it's brilliant. So to go back there and be so wonderfully welcomed and embraced, it was lovely. It really felt special.
It is really nice. Whenever I go back to Portugal, I go to Cascais.
Oh, yeah. They won't forget. They don't forget you there, Scott. Don't forget.
So then you moved to Celtic. Why did you leave it?
Yeah,
why
I mean,
Celtic?
my goodness me. Yeah, from, Pisa, I remember Pisa 1989, Pisa got relegated. So the president, you know, he wanted to cash in. Club had got relegated. He knew, you know, there was no way going to get back. So he just said to me, Paul, what do you want to do? I said, I don't know. I'm happy. I enjoy it. So I remember West Ham were looking at me. Nottingham Forest wanted to sign me then. Brian Clough, I remember, you know, wanted to sign me. West Ham wanted to do something. So I said to myself, well, I was only 25, you know, young man, you know, sort of 26. And I thought, and then Billy McNeil, he was my manager at Aston Villa. So, you know, through a third party, he got on the phone and he says, big man, I said, yes, Billy, how are you doing? He says, listen, do you fancy this? Why don't you come up here? He says, you'll be a legend up here. I said, Scotland? I said, okay, let me give it some thought. And then Mark, I still kept in touch with Mark. Mark just got transferred to Glasgow Rangers. Souness just bought him. So he rings me up, I call him Wally. He says, big man, get yourself up here. He says, I will love you up here. He says, the place is mad. The place is mad. He says, within a 5-mile radius or 3-mile radius, you've got the 2 biggest clubs. He says, there's not an energy like it, a day-to-day intensity. He says, it's made for you. So then, okay. I had a further chat with Big Bill. He says, yeah, I'll do it. I fancy it. So then went there to Scotland. The place was everything that Mark said and more. But the Scotland, I mean, that was a brilliant move. I mean, the humour, the passion, the energy, the love for football. There was this in day-to-day intensity in this cauldron called Glasgow, called the Glasgow Fishbowl, that you could just not... I can see why it breaks some people because, Scott, you'll know you need a special kind of mental strength and mentality to play in those kind of cities because you can see, you know, if I looked at my whole journey, you've had players that's gone to certain cities and they've struggled, very, very talented and probably feel comfortable in more provincial clubs because you don't have that day-to-day pressure and intensity from the media, from the supporters. You go out socially, you can't hide, you've got no private life. But I loved it. You know, I was completely the reverse. Going there and playing in some of them old firm games, I mean, it was just...
I was going to ask, tell us not just the game, but the build-up to it as well.
The build-up was just... I mean, what will happen is you get something leaked out in the media about this and that, and then it'll just go crazy. You just get this mad vacuum of intensity, of media, of people, this rumour about something's happened, and it was ferocious. And it could be unforgiving as well. And the build-up to the old firm games was nothing like I've ever seen it before. It was like a World Cup final. And I remember then the guy says, big man, listen, we've got to win, we've got to deliver. Because he says, my mum and dad, they won't go to that. And it was true. They wouldn't go to work for at least a week if they got beat. He says they wouldn't go to work if Celtic got beat or Rangers. And I'm thinking, my goodness me, this is what it meant. And I have to say, you know, 60-odd thousand people at Ibrox and at Ibrox and at Celtic Park was unbelievable. And I remember the particular year when they signed Mo Johnson, because he was due to sign for Celtic, defected, Souness signed him, and I was marking him on the first game, and it was...
Did you give him a bit?
Oh, yeah, I had to. Yeah, I had to. I mean, we got beat 2-1, but this is big man, we don't care. Destroy him. You know, that was the mentality, Scott.
Okay, Gaffer.
You know, you can lose every game, but those 2 old firm games, you've got to get outcomes. You don't get outcomes, your history. But... You know, Mo was a good mate of mine, and they couldn't, and this was interesting, socially, they couldn't understand. I mean, we'd go, there's like a nightclub there called Victoria's. I mean, they said to me, big man, you know what, you should have a plaque on it with your name on it, the amount of times. It should be a blue plaque after
VIP membership.
Yeah, exactly, it was brilliant. But I used to go there, and you'd see all the Rangers there, and I knew them because, you know, you had Ali McCoy, Mo Johnston, Mark Haitley, Gary Stevens, Big Terry Butcher, Richard Goff, Chris Woods, all Anglo-Scots then, who were all my mates that I played back then in the first division, you know, when I was, you know, back in the 80s, Scott. And then you'd go and talk to them, and the Celtic sports say, what are you talking to them for? You know, and they says, oh, they said to me, big man, we pay your wages. Well, I says, do you pay my wages when I'm suspended, or when I'm ill, or I'm injured? And they, no, but you shouldn't talk. You know, it was rather parochial, but it was just the mindset and the mentality. So, but I have to say, it was 2 great years of my life. I love the people, the humour. It's fantastic.
How proud were you then? You were Footballer of the Year?
Yeah, I mean, when I look back, because I didn't know till even about a few years ago, people said to me, Paul, you were the first black English defender to play in Italy. I weren't aware of that. First black defender to play for Scotland and win the Scottish Player of the Year. I mean, I was there. I was aware of that because I was there, you know, because obviously that was sort of well promoted. So I look back on all those things, and obviously I had the issues with racism and all the challenges, but I rode above that. I got above and beyond that. And I just showed, you know, my excellence in the way I played and led, because that's important, leadership.
How difficult was it to ride above all that?
Yeah, it was tough, Scott. I mean, you know, playing in front of thousands. I mean, I've been there when you've had the banana throwing, the monkey chanting. I mean, it's despicable. But one of the games, you know, I remember turning it into a negative to a positive, where, you know, a shower of bananas. You know, I had a bad day. I was having a bad day at the office, as we do. I think I scored. Must have been an OG deflection. Shower of bananas come on, and what I'd done actually, I can't remember. Picked one up, ate it, threw it back at the offenders. The supporters went, they went crazy, and thereafter, good second half, and I managed to score the winner. We won the game. And I remember being interviewed, and the journalist was saying to me, big man. I said, yeah. He says, first half you were shocking. You had a shocker. I said, yes, I did, unfortunately. He says, well, you know, what happened in the second half? He says, you were like a colossus. You know, I says, well, you know, do you remember when I got that shower of bananas? You know, I bit it and then throw it back. I says, it was the potassium in the banana that inspired my performance, you know, and galvanised me and mobilised me to go and be the king and get the winner in the game. So my point is, Scott, I turned it around and used it the right way. I've seen negatively the impact it's had on players, and they've been traumatised, and I get that, I understand that, but it was my strength of character, my forceful nature, but also my humour and my attitude, because you have to approach things in the appropriate way. And, you know, my generation starting off, you know, it was tough. You know, even when I was at Charlton, we used to play up north, play at places like Leeds, Newcastle, Burnley, tough places to play for black players, you know, and I used to get horrific abuse. So that kind of experience, I think, was the catalyst to me knowing to say, you can't react to that, you know. It's not right, and there weren't a real legislative framework in place, but I had to rise above it with excellence and leadership, and that's what my parents always told me, don't show your weakness. And it's hard, because sometimes, you know, I've been a bit naughty, you know, where I've had a red card or two for being a bit naughty, but, you know, in the main, I've tried, that's been my attitude, and I've always said to people, rise above that. I says, the best way you nullify that is with excellence on the field of play.
I love the saying, turn a negative into a positive. That's how I work as well, the mantra. Yeah. Would that, if someone was to say to you, you know, give advice to the modern day black player, would that be similar advice, or has it changed a bit?
Yeah, I mean, we've got some, as you know, the world that we're living in at the moment and the ramifications of COVID-19, it's brought about so many issues around institutional, structural, systematic racism, racial inequality, social inequality, you know. But what's really, I tell you what's really mobilised me and what's really galvanised my thinking when I've seen the manner of a lot of young black players that have been dealing with it. Your Raheem Sterlings, your Marcus Rashford, Tyrone Mings. I also, when I think about the England players, the black players, when they played in Bulgaria, Montenegro, and the solidarity amongst the players, magnificent. But that, for me, the person that deserves the most credit for that is one man, Gareth Southgate, the England manager. He's an outstanding man of the highest order. Not a manager, he's that as well, but as a human being. And what he had done, he'd given them the confidence to speak out. This is what the modern day, and there's no fear. and they speak very eloquently, very articulately about the issues. And I think, Scott, that's been a defining change now, that people now, a lot of my generation, couldn't do that, for fear. I remember my seminal moment, but in the main, many of them felt, well, I can't say that, and they suffered in silence. But this modern generation, they're powerful, they're confident, they're articulate, and they're strong. But also, I think there's been a lot of strong campaigners in the background doing a lot of good work to challenge organisations, challenging the stakeholders, when we're speaking about equality of opportunity, human rights to work in a racism-free environment. These are all the causes that I fight for. So I think although we're in a really challenging time and have been in this space in the last number of years, I really hope by bringing it all to the surface, people talking about it, people engaging in the subject matter, but people still have to laugh. We mustn't lose the humour. And I think that's what I'm worried about, and also everything getting too politically correct. Yeah. I think that's a real consideration in my current thinking, because I don't want people not to be able to engage, articulate and walk into a room and think, I have to think about everything that I have to say because I don't want to go offside, because then with the potency and the profiling of social media, you only have to say one thing, that one thing can get you the sack. So we've got to get this real balance right. And nobody knows what that looks like yet, Scott. I think we are working through a process. And once we continue down that process, and I think once we and football's got a big role to play. The power of football, the power of what clubs like Charlton do at the roots of the community. I mean, I use a phrase with Charlton, I nicked this from Jason Morgan, or he might have nicked it from me.
Jason Morgan, MBE.
Yeah, MBE,
MBE.
that's right,
Yeah.
That's right,
Yeah.
that's right. He always says, when we used to speak, and he used to give me a punchline. He says, big man, say this. He says, we'll never be Barcelona on the field of play, but off the field in the roots of the community and our work across equality, diversity and inclusion and social inclusion and women and girls football and, we're the Barcelona and more. And I have to say to you, I mean, he should patent that. I owe him a few quid on that. I owe him a pint on that one, but I use that all the time. And then people, yeah, you're right. So there are little things like that.
He's done fantastic work.
Yeah.
And we'll chat a little bit more about present day, but we still haven't finished with your illustrious career yet.
Bless you.
You went to Chelsea.
Yeah.
£1.4 million, which is a lot of money back then.
Listen, I
wasn't
didn't get nothing out of that deal, to be honest, with the 1.4 million. But yeah, I mean, it was a massive fee, massive opportunity. Ken Bates was an interesting guy.
Wasn't he?
Uncle Ken, yeah. We still speak till now. Get on very well with him.
The day I signed for Chelsea, I happened to meet him there. I don't think it was necessarily arranged. And he looked me up and down and he went, is that all we've got for $750,000? Because I was out of contract. And
right,
left
okay.
Charlton
I remember that, Scott. Yes,
to go to Chelsea. But he had this humour about him, didn't he?
Yeah, he always wanted to have the last word, so you let him have the last word. But I tell you what, he was kind. Ultimately, Scott, you treat people how people are with you. And Ken had a rather interesting personality, character, but he was absolutely brilliant with me. Absolutely brilliant. And very kind, very generous, very giving, because he knew, if you were a groundsman and you're mowing the lawn and you miss that piece out there, he'd go two-footed on you the same way he'd go two-footed on you if you were a player and you pulled out of that challenge. He wanted to do it properly, win properly.
And treat everyone the same.
Correct. And he carried those real human values that I really, really respected. So if you were a player and you gave him 100%, he'll take care of you. But if you cheat him, your history.
You were the first black captain for Chelsea.
That's
Did you
right.
know that at the time?
I didn't know that because everybody spoke about like the Paul Canaville era. I remember I was made the first black club and team captain. I remember winning the Player of the Year my first year, and I was very proud of that. But only, I suppose, Scott, the reason I was so proud of that because of Chelsea's history. I remember actually a game playing for Charlton as a 16-year-old boy playing over at Stamford Bridge. My goodness me, not for the faint-hearted, because you had like the National Front, the BNP, that you had that visibility outside stadiums, and it was just like normal. You turn up with these guys, shaving hair like my hair is now, but they have the boots on and handing out all the... And you're thinking, my goodness me, And I have to say, I've never really, really been nervous, but because what was there, that represented what society was like at that juncture. you know.
So was that as intimidated almost you've ever felt on a football pitch?
Yeah, for sure. And I remember then that at Chelsea, then you had like the electric fences as well, and you know, and I just think that, I mean, I always felt safe in South London, you know, because it's my own, very diverse. But then once you sort of start going that way, you felt a little bit uneasy. So I remember, so the wonderful thing, and I remember speaking to Ken about this, you know, was that journey of evolution with Chelsea, to see this is what they were like. They represented society and the ugly days of the hooliganism in obviously the 70s, them amongst other clubs. But then when I went there as, you know, went back as, you know, become, you know, and Ken was very clever. I mean, obviously for professional reasons, sporting reasons, but also he knew environmentally as well. It sent out a very strong message. And then, you know, Chelsea then, where it got into the, you know, the Premier League was formed, stadiums were far more diverse, far more women, far more inclusive, far more people with disabilities. So it sent out such a potent message of evolution. And it was a measure of the evolution, not just of the club, but of society and football, the way football then had emerged. So that was great. And I loved my time there. And I've got a strong affection for Chelsea, because I think I was part of that evolution, that catalyst for change.
So many highs in your football career, obviously some lows, but one obvious extreme low, the tackle by Dean Smith, which ended your career. What do you remember about that day?
Well, I remember because we were staying, we travelled up on the Friday, and I remember reading that, I don't know if it was the Echoes, that pink newspaper, Scott. I don't know, Liverpool Echo it might have been. Yeah. It might have been. And I remember reading that, and it was talking about me. You know, I think I'd, you know, played captain England under 21s, the England B, and they were talking about, you know, me. I'd already got picked for the England squad, but didn't play, and it was like a big sort of confrontation myself and Mark Wright. Mark played at Southampton, Elliott v Wright. Okay, blah 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 blah. I read that, and you know, and I'm, you know, feeling really good about myself, and think, okay, you know, Liverpool, big platform. And then I think it was after about, I actually remember the day. I'm sure it was September the 9th, 1992. And, you know, I remember the ball sort of rolled into the space, around the halfway line, and my eyes were on the ball. And then I sort of went to the ball, and then I saw somebody in my peripheral vision come across, who was Saunderson, smash, went on my knee, and what I remember feeling was the most excruciating pain ever. And I remember they stopped, and, you know, and Bob Ward would come on the physio, and there was a melee of people around me. And then, you know, Bob, he says, went like that. So they got me off and then got me straight away to hospital. I had emergency surgery that night. And then, you know, there was months and months and months of rehabilitation. And it was tough, you know, I mean, mentally. But I was very lucky, you know, and I know I've got a strange attitude to life, but it served me well. And there's a couple of things that are significant to me. And two things. Number one, I remember Gary Llewellyn, who's one of the elite physios. I remember talking to him about a year ago. And my knee, the damage on the knee was just a mess. I mean, it was like, I remember the quote was, it was like a bus hitting you at 30 miles an hour. That was the trauma embedded around the knee. And the knee had what you call a 12-inch abrasion. That's a swelling, 12 inches. So what's that? Yeah? So, yeah. So the damage to the knee was, I mean, I had no idea. I was aware, obviously it's very serious, because I'd done my left sort of cruciate ligament. So don't ask me a question about a knee. I know as much about a knee as I do about politics and diplomatic affairs. I'm well cognizant with a knee. So I remember talking to Gary, and Gary said to me, Paul, you know, even today, if you had that same, if a player had that the level of that injury, he or she wouldn't get back to play. Because I ruptured the anterior cruciate, the posterior cruciate, the lateral complex, the medial complex. That's the composition of the knee with the 4 key ligaments. So the chap ruptured all 4 of them. So I worked my socks off to get back. I remember when I knew I wasn't going to get back. I remember when I was at Chelsea, and you know, it was like this was after about 18 months of rehab. You know, I mean, I remember I was like Popeye then, you know, eating spinach. You know, my leg was like it was like a tree trunk, Scott. You know, bigger than the circumference of that leg was bigger than this one. So I'm thinking the knee's built up, and I remember, you know, Bob said to me, he called me Jamaica. He said, Jamaica, give it everything you've got. I said, okay. So I ran, sprinting, and it was like a slalom test. So, like a skier. So I went in and out, and then you had to sort of put all your body weight then and use that to lift off. And I'd done that. I remember sort of coming towards it's like a 40 metre, and then my knee just totally went. Then I realised, and I was down, I was screaming with pain. He says, Drake, it's all right, because the knee was strong enough and built up enough to go for that. I never done myself any damage because obviously the ligaments were repaired as much as they could have been, but obviously to play at that level, not going to happen. So I remember that, and then I knew then psychologically I was never going to be at the level that I could be. So, I accepted that, went through.
Did you accept it? How hard was that to accept?
Yeah, it was hard.
Even if you have the best philosophy in the world, that's hard.
Only, Scott, because I'll tell you why it was, because, I'm a street fighter kind of guy. I'm tough, I'm resilient, but I try to be empathetic and compassionate. I think I've got a balance in my character. And also thinking about my previous, I remember this leg, when I was at Luton, I had a double fracture. So I'd done a tibia, fibia, and, to have that kind of injury at sort of 18, many people were writing me off. And I remember, I couldn't sort of straighten my leg. But I knew then, I knew I'd get back because I knew I was strong, confident. I worked my socks off in training and rehabilitation. And at that age, you've got no fear. So I got back to that, the one in Italy, when I got, had a cruise ship then in Italy, no problem. Got back and went on to better things. So, so it's not, because and I know, being the athletes that we've been, the psychology plays so much in this. The psychology is 97, 98%. So psychologically, I knew I had no issues. It was about mechanically, operatively, could they get the operation right? But this one, the third one, just wasn't, it's just too much. It was just too much. So I realised that, the most important thing for me to have quality of life then at that juncture. And also, the greatest thing that ever happened to me, was my son, Dominic, because he was born, 8 weeks after I had the injury. So, my legs pinned up, and my son, and that's a proud moment.
It's the greatest gift someone can have.
And also, Scott, because, my wife she had a challenging time with the birth. We almost lost him. So that made it, so what that done, that adversity, the focus away from Paul Elliott's career, that's a microcosm of this human life. We were just talking about, Jace was asking me about my son Dom, and he's 26 now, he's an outstanding young man. Those are the human things that supersede that. And so my career, what had happened to me was an absolute microcosm because my son was on the way and being born. So then my whole focus changed. So it was just about him, what I'm going to do with myself, my career, and then moving forward. It wasn't about any bitterness, because I'm not a bitter person by nature. I just left that behind, and then my focus shifted.
Yeah, but not many could have done it like that. That shows that the type of mentality you have. And I think it's very important to define yourself not by the work you do, but the person you are. And clearly you're able to move on. And that was great. Look, you were appointed MBE, 2003.
Yeah, remember the same club as Jace, eh?
Yeah, well, you supersede him. We'll come on to that in just a sec.
I got there.
But with this sort of anti-racism initiatives, how did you feel that was almost a calling for you to get involved, and how did that make you feel?
Yeah, Scott, because I remember my generation of player, it was hard to get jobs in coaching, management, all the issues that's gone on. We've lost 2 or 3 generations of black players who could have been coaches for a number of reasons, as we know, that's been dominated by racism. But I just felt that, okay, weren't going to be a coach, wasn't going to be a manager. I looked at my own skill sets, my assets, my journey, and this wonderful man, this mentor called Lord Herman Ousley, we co-founded Kick It Out in the mid-90s, early 90s. Because he said to me, Paul, look at your journey, look what you've achieved, look what you've done, and I kind of look back on it. And also I spoke out about these issues, but spoke out constructively, articulately, sensibly, practically. Everybody talking about problems, I talk about the solution and how we're going to get to the destination on the solution. That's my mindset. And he says, Paul, you've got so much to offer. So I remember, and that was while I was sort of during my rehabilitation, Scott, so I'm hobbling around like that, going to these sort of meetings with government, with Herman, football clubs, saying, okay then, how can I help? How can I be of service? How can I give something back to football, society, community, make a positive contribution? So this was like, I suppose, my natural calling. So that's where it went into Kick It Out, then into UEFA, then into a number of things. And then, I was invited to join the trust as one of the sort of co-founders of the Charlton Athletic Charitable Trust, which was great. And that was for me, that meant so much to me because of my local history of the club, the environment, the local community. And I was so proud and honoured because I know the values that was embedded in Charlton and what it stood for.
Was that before or after the CBE where you just superseded Jason?
No, that's right. That was, yes, that was before.
Right.
So I'd done all that. And then obviously I was very lucky that the Queen came knocking and, awarded me my CBE. And it was a proud moment because...
that was for services for equality, wasn't it? And diversity in football.
Yes. And it was brilliant. And I mean, it was to me personally, but I think it was to a lot of people. I saw it for football, for community, for my family, and for the people that I could try and empower and impact and make a difference to their lives. So that's those that know me well know that's what I'm really about. So that was just, I didn't need the recognition, but I'm not going to say no to be a commander of the British Empire. And commander feels a bit like a captain, really. So the nearest thing I got to being a captain was a commander.
From now on, I should call you commander.
You've got to bow to me next time you see me.
I will do that.
You've got to go down on one knee, mate. I can't do it.
Once we finish this, I'll do it. Chairman of the FA's Inclusion Advisory Boards. How have you become involved in that? And how's that going?
I mean, again, that was just a calling, a destination. I represent them on the FA board. I sit on the FA council. I sit on the professional game board. I sit on UEFA social responsibility and an anti-discriminatory committee. These is all around equality, diversity, and inclusion. And this is just me, Scott, just trying to be as impactful as I can across the whole of football. Working with football, working with stakeholders. Because I said to people, so many people have taken, but give back. Give back of yourself, your time, your expertise. And it's part of that whole wider sort of international network where, because football now, it's, with social media, with clubs, with the international composition and the clubs as global brands, it's very... It's just a natural fit, with international players from all over the world, with the Premier League, 4.7 billion audience in 188 countries globally. It's, that diversity carries issues and challenges, but through the power of football and the reach of football and the empowerment and the impact that football has, it was just a naturalised way. Everything that's happened to me has been effortless insofar as that some things just find their way to you, don't they? You sit, you speak, somebody watches that goes there. And there's a great, I think what gives me a lot of pleasure, there's a great will, notwithstanding the challenges, notwithstanding the journey, there's such a great will and desire by football. Football's not responsible for societal's issues and problems, but football's playing a magnificent role. Our football clubs like Charlton, that's been the very vanguard of equality, diversity and inclusion, they are leading the way for football with a coalition of other clubs. And that's the greatest thing, whether it's the coalition of London United, the London clubs, if you look at all the clubs, what they're doing across the whole of the country. And it's not just, it's good to see also the big clubs, the big brands, your Liverpools, your Tottenhams, your Arsenals, your Chelseas, your Man United. I know they're also committed as well, but it's your Charlton Athletics. They're the real foundation for me and the very vanguard of best practice that really leads football.
Well, Charlton have been doing it, and for decades as well, having that long history.
That's the point.
Because Scott, everybody is doing really well now. Charlton has
people didn't, they've got it's called history.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's about culture, but culture is made by your values. When your values are right, you create the right culture, you create the right environment. And Charlton historically has been fed on diversity. The fan base has been representative of the local demographic. The players have come in, they've had black players back from, late 70s, early 80s, when certain clubs, a lot of clubs, weren't even taking black players. But I don't think it's actually anything the clubs had to work particularly hard at, because I think, the leadership is important, but I think it's just been this particular characteristic that's been embedded in their DNA. So when football is evolved, and when other clubs has evolved, it was what I call food and drink to Charlton, because they're already doing it. But they were doing it because it was the right thing to do, because it was part of their culture, part of their DNA, and embedded in their day-to-day values.
Just a couple more things. You introduced the new Football Leadership Diversity Code during
Brilliant.
Black History Month last year.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more.
I mean, I'm looking back, this could be amongst one of the biggest things I've done in terms of reward that makes me feel so good. This was born out of George Floyd, the murder, the senseless brutality. And I'm thinking, I said to my FA, the chairman, the CEO, we need to be proactive, not reactive. I said, I've got this idea, equality, diversity, inclusion. We know of the historical issues about the visibility on the field of play. 33% of the players are black. But where's that visibility in senior leadership? Where is that in coaching? Where is that in team operations? We've got a great opportunity using the assets that we've got, which are the players, which, we could do something really good. So we could create a code to encourage greater diversity, equality, diversity and inclusion. So it's a targets-driven where we're holding football to account. So I've put together the structure, the organisational structure, and the greatest thing is we had the composition of my board. My structure was made up of chairman, owners, players, managers, HR directors, female coaches, male coaches, black, white, people with disabilities, HR, sponsors and media. So I created a coalition of partners and say, this is, all of you have got to input into what I'm trying to do. This is a destination I want to go. So what we captured beautifully was diversity of thought, diversity of thinking. And the response that we've had has been fantastic. I presented it to UEFA, I presented it to the government. They think it's great, they're so supportive of it. And, we've got endorsements from the Premier League, the EFL, the PFA, the LMA, and obviously the FA. So I think it's something, it really, notwithstanding the good work that football's doing, there's still obviously what I call 21st century challenges. So organisations, Charlton were one of the very first clubs to sign up, and that's the only thing I took for granted out of this, that Charlton were going to be one of the key signatories, and they were. So it's great, I think, and what I'm doing now, simultaneously we've launched that last October, Black History Month. Now I'm designing a grassroots code to be launched next month, and then I'm working with the Premier League to do a club community code. So there's 3 massive codes that I think over the next 3, 5, 7, 10 years is really going to make such a positive difference to get greater inclusion, equality, diversity at all levels of the game, from grassroots right the way to the boardroom. So you've got the golden thread is going to be equality, diversity and inclusion. That's the vision, that's the strategy.
Yeah, we touched on Charlton, and the club has launched a new EDI consultation framework.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned Thomas as well, but how impressed have you been with the club and the new owners' commitment to EDI?
To be honest with you, it's been effortless because he believes in it. He understands the socio-human and the economic values of a diverse and inclusive workforce. So it's about doing the right thing. And I've never met Thomas, and one day I hope to, but we are indebted to this man. I call myself we as in Charlton. I'm a Charlton man, I think because this area of work, it's embedded in his own journey. He's obviously Scandinavian, isn't he? But obviously lives in the States. So he would be cognizant of the whole social issues that's going on in America. And, America's a very challenging place. And I think him coming to the UK and he's sort of looking at this club and thinking, my goodness me, he was made for this club and this club was made for him. I think it's an aligned partnership. So I think that his vision, his strategy, but critically the most important thing is his leadership. Without leaders that believe in it, nothing happens. So I feel very safe. It's like he's got the baby in his arms. He's feeding it, he's changing the nappies. He's probably had a few late nights walking with a baby on his shoulder. But you know what?
He's the daddy. Hands.
It's in the right hands. It's in very safe hands. And I look at Charlton now, within the EDI. I compare it like forest green to green in the environment. Charlton will be the equivalent. They've been that historically, but they're going to take that onto a level through equality, diversity and inclusion. They are going to modernise, not just the organisation, but they're going to be best practice exemplar for the rest of football and the impact that's going to have on society, because they were doing this way before many others. You know, in Greenwich, Bexley, and, you know, all their local rise partnerships that, you know, the club engages with 500,000 kids a week, you know, 250 schools, you know, 500,000 kids per annum, 250 schools from my latest understanding. So, but it's embedded in their DNA, it's embedded in the values. So they take that everywhere with them. And the partnerships they've had since the 90s with the care partnerships, you know, I mean, it's been magnificent. So Charlton, they've got a history. It's steeped in history of equality, diversity and inclusion. So what all they're doing, they're just being the best practice and the exemplar, you know, for the rest of football to follow. But the good thing is, the great thing about it is, whilst Charlton's the exemplar, football now, there's a focus, there's an awareness, there's a collective collaboration now that football are utterly, because I've said, and I say this every day, I mean, I'm, you know, to my board members at the FA, and I say to UEFA, if we look what the world's gone through the last 18 months, look where we are now, moving forward, we've created the diversity code, but equality, diversity and inclusion has got to be that key component that's embedded from schools to grassroots to the football pitch to the boardrooms. That's got to be the golden thread that the whole foundation of English football is built on in society and communities.
Final one on you, Paul Elliott. You've achieved so much. You still feel you've so much more to come?
Listen, Jason will have a laugh when he sees this. Many years ago when we was in South Africa, I just had my knees done, you know, and I had a sort of, call it an MOT, periodic MOT, Scott, you know, and there was one of the events in Kailash, and, you know, I was there and I was doing my dancing, doing my jigging, and the knees were bouncing, the cruciates felt great. And I think this has re-energised me to go to the next level. One of my biggest attributes is my energy. I get things done, and it's about taking people with you. So, you know what? Out of the most extreme, brutal adversity we've lived through, good's going to come out of it. Football's going to be more aligned than ever before and leading the way. And clubs like Charlton and the rest of the footballing family, you know, there's light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccine, the feel-good factor, the Euros to look forward to. I think now, you know, I say we're coming for the second half now, and the second half is going to be where EDI, the awareness, the understanding, the education, the way it impacts young people, schools, adults, it's going to be that key and catalyst to full integration, break down those barriers, and everybody be united and inextricably aligned.
The energy just exudes from you, Paul. And you'll be taking a lot of people with you if you haven't already.
Cheers.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank
Good to
you,
see you.
Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you, mate.